I'm not allowed to have feelings anymore. My name's Elise. I'm 32. And apparently, being honest about what you feel makes you the villain. Everyone thinks I'm a terrible person. Selfish. Cold. Homewrecker. But all I ever did was speak the truth. About my heart, my loneliness, the aching silence in my marriage. I didn't scream, I didn't cheat on a whim. I just stopped pretending. So let me tell you the story, my story, because everyone else has it wrong. 3 years ago I married Daniel. By all accounts, he's a great man. Reliable, hardworking, thoughtful in the ways people are told to be thoughtful. He works in logistics, supply chains, shipments, scheduling, and I manage customer relations, which basically means I spend all day absorbing people's anger and frustration and offering polite apologies in return. Emotional janitor, really. Daniel and I had a routine. Morning coffee, texts during the day, dinner at 7, Netflix until we fell asleep. On the outside we look stable. Happy even. But routines can become cages. And safe can start to feel like invisible. Daniel was kind, yes. But he was never curious. He'd ask how my day went, I'd say fine. And that was that. No follow-up. No digging. No wanting to understand the person behind the answer. Just a husband checking a box. Then 8 months ago, Jonah transferred into our department. Now I know what you're thinking. That this is where I started hunting for something that wasn't mine. But that's not what happened. Jonah had this quiet intensity. Not in a flirtatious way, not at first. Just attentive. When I talked about a frustrating call, he'd ask what the customer said that got under my skin. If I looked tired, he'd bring me coffee. Exactly how I like it, without being asked. He paid attention. And he listened. Really listened. He wasn't staring at his screen, nodding like he was waiting for me to shut up. He was present, engaged, human. Jonah was freshly divorced, still nursing the wounds. He told me his ex-wife used to shut down whenever they fought, left him talking to walls and empty rooms. He said that made him feel invisible. That word stuck in my chest like a splinter. Because that's how I felt too. So we talked. At lunch, during breaks, sometimes when we both stayed late. And those conversations, they were oxygen. They were like color bleeding back into my grayscale world. I told him things I'd never dared say out loud before. That I felt like a ghost in my own home. That Daniel thought being a good husband meant providing and showing up, but not knowing me. That he never asked who I was beneath the politeness and the routines. That sometimes I felt like an actress playing wife. Jonah got it. He'd nod and say things like asterisk. You deserve someone who doesn't just love you but sees you. Asterisk. And the awful part. I wasn't hiding any of this from Daniel at first. I told him about Jonah. About how we talked. About how he'd helped me with work issues or made me laugh on bad days. Daniel would smile and say, "That's nice, honey," and move on. No curiosity. No concern. Just apathy in a mask of trust. It wasn't emotional cheating. Not at first. It was just feeling again. Feeling heard. Feeling noticed. Feeling like my mind mattered. But things shifted. One night, Jonah and I were working late, and he asked me, "Are you happy in your marriage?" I didn't know how to answer. My instinct said to lie, to say yes, to change the subject. But sitting in that quiet office, under buzzing fluorescent lights, next to someone who was actually listening, I couldn't lie. I said, "I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my own life." He didn't look shocked. He just gently reached for my hand and said, "I know exactly what you mean." I didn't pull away. I let the silence hold us. After that, it was different. Texts turned personal. Then intimate. Then emotional. Then physical. It didn't happen overnight. But it did happen. We started seeing each other outside of work. Coffee shops across town. Dinners after Daniel thought I was working late. Weekend errands that were actually long drives and lingering conversations in parking lots. And if you want to judge me, fine. But don't pretend to know what it's like to wake up next to someone who sees your body but not your soul. Who says, "I love you," like it's part of the script, not because he means it. With Jonah, I felt alive. Not just desired, but wanted for who I am. The messy parts, the dark corners, the contradictions. He didn't love a role I played, he loved me. But then, just when I had surrendered to the possibility of something real, Jonah began to pull away. Late replies, distant eyes, cancelled plans. When I asked, he said he was overwhelmed, that things were getting complicated. Then one night, after we'd spent hours talking in his car, he said, I think we need space. I'm not ready for what this is becoming. And just like that, he was gone. At work, he was polite but hollow. And at home, I was unraveling. Daniel noticed, asked if I was okay, but how do you say, I'm grieving someone who isn't supposed to exist in my life? Panic. What if Jonah told someone? What if word got back to Daniel? What if I destroyed everything for a man who no longer looked at me like I mattered? So I did the only thing I had left. Told Daniel. Not because I wanted forgiveness. Not because I felt guilt. But because I needed control. I needed him to hear the truth from me. We sat down on a Sunday. No distractions. No phones. I told him I loved him. That I wanted to work on our marriage. But I had to be honest. I'd had an affair. I told him how it started. Why it started. That it wasn't about sex, it was about being seen. But Daniel didn't want context. He wanted facts. Locations. Numbers. Like he was building a case. When I tried to explain that I still had feelings for Jonah, he shut down. Said he couldn't deal with that level of disrespect. He wanted me to say Jonah meant nothing. But I couldn't lie anymore. Hadn't lying already destroyed enough? I suggested therapy. Third party. Someone who could help us understand the deeper fractures. We saw Dr. Morgan. In our first session, I laid everything bare. I told her I wasn't over Jonah. That I was committed to working on our marriage but needed Daniel to see why it happened. That emotional starvation is real. That silence can kill love just as fast as cruelty. Dr. Morgan nodded. She said healing from betrayal means addressing the emotional rot underneath. Not just patching the cracks. That feelings for someone outside the marriage don't just switch off because they're inconvenient. But Daniel hated that. He said she was taking my side. That she was excusing cheating. He didn't want to heal. He wanted to win. After 2 months of therapy, he said he was done. And that's when I knew. Daniel didn't want me, he wanted the idea of me. The compliant wife who didn't ask for anything messy or inconvenient. Who filled a role and smiled on cue. But I'm not a role. I'm a person. And I couldn't lie anymore. So I told him quietly, clearly, without drama. I can't pretend I don't love Jonah.